Hi guys, in today's video I'm going to be revisiting mastering. Going to do a sort of refresher course on it and try to explain it in a bit more detail than maybe I did previously. So what you've got up in front of you at the moment, so just before obviously I start this, there's no super chain or there's no perfect chain that you can put onto every track that will make it sound perfect, and mastering isn't there to make stuff sound perfect. Mastering is there it's just to finalize the track and make it, as ready to release really. So it's the mixing part is very important. So make sure you mix really well, and we'll look at that in another video in the future. And then obviously once you've mixed your track down, mastering is just the final touch, so like the polish on it once it's made. So there's, like I said, there's no specific chain, but I'm going to show you a couple of rules you can try to follow to ensure that you're getting the best out of your mastering. So in front of you at the moment, you've got basically 6 stages to mastering. Now, your track may need 6 stages, your track may need 2 stages, your track may need 15 stages. But these are the basic ones, and I'll show you them. So the first one we've got down there, number 1, is volume control. That should always be the top one. The volume control should always be the top one. And then the 6th one is limiting. And that should always be the final stage. So whatever you do in between, what doesn't matter. It's volume control first, and then limiting after. So you've got volume control, peak control, EQ, multiband compression, stereo shaping, and then limiting. So we'll talk you through each one of these, and then we'll go and give you some examples. I'm going to give you 2 examples. I'm going to give you one using stock plugins, and then I'll give you one using third-party plugins. So number 1, volume control. What is volume control? So once you've mixed your track, the track may be a little bit hot, which means it's a little bit loud. It may be a little bit quiet. So you can use the volume control. You can just use some sort of utility or a compressor with a 1:1 ratio, and you can just bring the volume up and down to whatever level you feel comfortable with starting with. Then peak control. So peak control would be a compressor. So we start with a compressor, and we'll add maybe a compressor in there to catch any wayward peaks or anything that's sort of sticking out the track, and we'll just pull them back in into the track. So it's very, very light compression in there. We're just pulling anything that's sort of out of the ordinary. We're pulling in now so that the limiter later on doesn't have to do as much work. Third one would be, we'll look at EQ. So is the track too bassy, too boomy, too quiet in certain areas, too loud in certain areas? Is there any problem frequencies or anything like that? We can look at adding EQ or taking away EQ just to get the mix to sort of sound sort of final. Then we can add a multi-band compressor in there, which is another form of compression, just to get all the levels sort of straight going into the limiting. So all the levels are straight. We may find that the bass may need a little bit tighter compression than other things, and we can do them in 3 stages. And then stereo shaping. So stereo shaping would be try to get the mix sounding as wide as possible. Try to make sure the low end's in mono and it's not phasing and stuff like that. And then finally limiting, which obviously limits the track, and we try to just push that as loud as we can without obviously ruining the dynamics of a track too much. So 2, 3, 4 and 5, you may not need to use any of them. You may need to use them twice over. So you may need to peak control, EQ, peak control again, multi-button compression, another compressor, then a stereo shaper, then a limiter, and then a final limiter. You may need to do a lot of things to get your track sounding right. But if you follow those basic rules, and on this particular example, that's what rules I'm going to follow. I'm going to follow the volume control, peak, EQ, multiband, and then stereo shaping and limiting. So let's get into a first example where I'm looking at stock plugins. Okay, so here we go. So first thing I'm going to do is loop a section, the loudest section of the track, because this is what's going to hit the limit the hardest. And if we can get this sounding good, then the rest of the track will fall into place. Let's just give it a little blast. Okay, the first thing we'll look at is volume control. So let's add this in first of all. Now, luckily for me, obviously this is my track, so I know that this is set to the perfect volume, but this will be the stage where if it's too quiet, we can maybe bring it up a little bit, or if it's too loud, we can maybe bring it down a little bit. So it's moving into the next stage. So the next stage we're going to add in a compressor. Now we're not going to use a normal compressor. We're going to use a glue compressor for this one, because we're just trying to glue the track together. We're not compressing anything hard. We'll play it. We'll leave the attack at 1:1. leave the ratio release in the center as well, and we'll leave the ratio 4. I'm going to pull the threshold back and just to see it peaking and just catching those wayward peaks. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is grab the loudest section of the track where all your instruments are playing together, because this is going to be the section that we're going to use as a reference to make sure that it sounds good here and it'll sound good everywhere else. The first thing I'm going to do is, like I said, is number 1 is volume control. So we're going to add this utility in. Now, luckily for me, this is my track, so I already know that the volume's sort of okay and I'm happy enough with this level to master at this level. If the track's a little bit quiet, you can add some gain in. If it's too loud, you can sort of pull it back a little bit. I'm using this utility. So the next thing we're going to add in is the peak control. Now, I'm not going to use a standard compressor. I'm going to use the glue compressor. The reason being is this is exactly what we want to do. We're just looking to glue the track. We're looking to just manage the peaks. So we'll play it. We'll keep the attack, the release, and the ratio all set to standard here. So we won't touch any of those. And we will just pull the threshold back until it starts peaking, until we start seeing this needle twitch. Okay, so that's just twitching it, so it's just catching the peaks of the track. And that's really what we want to do. So next we're going to look at some EQ. So we're going to add an EQ in. And let's have a listen through and see if we need to do anything to the track. So we're going to just grab this. I'm going to just move this around to make sure that there's nothing that stands out or nothing that needs boosting. So with the EQ, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm not going to boost anything, but so I won't really need to add an EQ in here. Like I said, you don't need to follow all the stages, but for the sake of the 6 stages, I'm going to leave the EQ on, and we won't touch any of the EQ at all. So once we've got the EQ in there, we are going to go on to the next step, which is going to be so we'll go through step 1, which is volume control, and then we've had the glue compressor, then the EQ, and the next step is going to be multiband compression. And for this, I'm going to add this to the multiband dynamic. So dynamics and compression basically mean the same thing. So let's add this in. Let's turn it off and then play it and add it in. So this is now grabbing all the different bands of the track, and we're going to play around with this until we make sure it sounds good to ourselves. Okay, so that sounds okay like that. So that's the multi-band compressor. And the next thing we're going to be looking at now is we're going to be looking at stereo shaping. Now, there is different instruments out there, but for this one, I'm going to use an EQ again, but we're going to use it differently to how we've used it before. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to change this stereo to M S, which means mid and sides. So now we have the ability to control the EQ on the mid and sides. For example, if we change it to stereo and we leave that alone and we turn this one on here, we drag this right down to the bottom, what you're going to find is it's going to make it mono. Because what we're actually doing there is taking all the side volume out of it. What I'm going to do with this EQ, we are going to just take out the sort of anything below about 90 hertz, because we want the stereo, the side of about 90 hertz, because that's going to leave the bass in mono, and your bass always wants to be in mono. So we'll play that through and see what it sounds like. So as you can hear there, at 90, we're cutting anything on from the sides out below 90 hertz. So all we're hearing from 90 hertz and below is the middle of the track, which basically puts your track in mono. So your kick, low end of the kick, low end of the bass, low end of the synths, low end of the percussion are all coming through in mono, which is what you need, because if you have it in stereo and you, for example, it's played in a club and it phases, it'll sound so weak and you won't hear any of the bass coming through. What we're now going to do is we're going to boost the sides. We're going to actually boost the sides of it. So let's take away these. Don't need these. We're going to boost the sides, and what this will do, if we both boost the sides of the track, it's going to make the sides spark a little bit more. So it's going to give the illusion that it's wider. So we'll play that. Show you what I mean. Just by doing that there, giving the volume, giving the EQ a boost, a little boost on the sides, it makes it more stereo. We've done that there now, we've played with a stereo thing. Now again, you might not need these, you might need any of these, you might need one or two of them, you might need to double up, you might need to add this in twice later on. We're then going to add a final limiter onto just the end of the track here. Then we're going to, so we want to get this peak in, so we want to make sure that this here catching the peak of the track, and this is doing the work, and make sure that it's not being distorted too much. Let's play and drag this in. So there's a basic side chain setting, the basic sort of chain setting. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back and have a look at them all again and make sure that everything's sounding sort of spot on. Or maybe tweak a few things as well. Now that we've got everything in, because remember, once you start adding compressors and EQs and multiband limiters and stereo stuff to a track, it's going to change the track. So you may need to pull back on something. You may need to, add something a little bit more in. So once you've gone through your initial chain, everything's sounding pretty good. Just go back and A/B everything. So let's do that now. Okay, so I'm quite happy with the way that sounds. It's a very quick sort of master there we've gone through. We followed the 6 basic steps. So what we'll do now is we'll jump into looking at using third-party plugins to do something very, very similar. Okay, so now we're going to look at using third-party plugins. Try and get the master sort of done here. So we'll go into the master, and first of all, we'll add in a volume control. And what I would tend to use with the volume control would be just you could just use a compressor, just a standard compressor, but with no ratio. So it's not actually doing any compressing on the actual track. All it's doing is it's just allowing us to use the gain part of the compressor to turn the volume up and down. So we've got no ratio on it there. This allows us to turn the volume up and down the track. And then we're going to add in a peak controller. We're going to add in a sort of a glue. What I'm going to use for this, I'm just going to use this compressor. There is a glue compressor, but I don't actually have it installed anymore. Once I moved over from my other laptop, a lot of my plugins I didn't reinstall, so I'm going to have to get around to doing that. But we'll just use this for now. Okay, so with that we're just catching the sort of peaks of a track, and then we're going to add in an EQ. Then we can add in a multi-band compressor, so I'm going to add in this OTT, but I'm going to turn it right down. And I'm going to dial the depth in. Then we can do some stereo shaping using this. Then we can finish it off with a limiter. Now I'm going to show you something slightly different. We're going to use two limiters. Rather than have one limiter do all the work, I'm actually going to split it and let two limiters. So rather than one limiter doing a lot of limiting, let's have two limiters doing a little bit each. Let's add a second limiter in. So there we go. So there's a second limit added in. So rather than use one limiter at the end to bear the brunt of the work, we've split it into two. So we've let one limiter do a little bit of work, and then the other limiter do a little bit of work. It's not as heavy on one limiter, and I think that sounds better, sort of overall. So that is the where you can look at using third-party plugins. So those plugins are available, you know. I mean, I know some can be quite expensive, but the likes of the OTT is free, and using this compressor, you can use any compressor. This is just like a utility control. You can get them free. There's a free, volume control sort of stuff out there. So I'm going to show you one final thing. I want to show you my actual master chain, and it follows what I've sort of explained to you there, in a sort of backwards way. So we're going to look at this now. What I actually got. So I don't need a volume control because I always make sure that my track is set when it's sort of ready, and then again I've got a limiter at the end, and in between sort of mess around sometimes. So the first thing I normally do is add in this OTT. We'll play through with the mastering, and I'll explain what I've done. Okay, so I have the OTT in there straight away, so I don't add a compressor to start with because my peaks are controlled throughout my track. I know there's nothing wayward in there. So I had the multiband compressor in there, so it's about 17. Then I had a limiter in, just doing a little bit of light limiting. And then I have it going into a second limiter. And this just has an enhance button which just boosts up stuff. And this just have this doing, that's all that this is doing, just using the enhance feature of this Oxford limiter, and it's pulling everything up by about 30%, and then this goes into the ozone, and then the ozone has an EQ which is never really used, it's flat, and then it goes into a multiband compressor because it goes into a second multiband compressor. So multiband compressor, and then it goes into a limiter that's not really limiting, it's more enhancing. And then it goes into another multiband compressor, and then it goes into one final limiter. So that's would be my sort of master chain there, which again it does follow the basic rules that I've give you, but it's in a slightly different way. It starts and ends the same, but in between the middle, like I said, the EQ I don't really need, and some of the stuff are backwards, and that's up to you to decide what way you want them things to go. Like I said, you might not need an EQ, you might want to use 2 EQs, you might want to use 3 EQs, that's in between. But if you follow those basic 6 steps, you should be able to get a fairly decent master out of your track. That you can. And now, if you're ever sending a track to be mastered, so if you ever want, if you're involved in the label, or if you ever want to send stuff to get mastered, make sure that everything's turned off your master channel. Make sure you've got everything turned off in FL Studio, and just press that button there, and that turns everything off your master channel. Make sure you've got at least 6 dB of headroom, so that the master engineer is able to sort of work his magic with it and get it as loud and clean as possible for you. Well, that's about it, guys, on this mastering sort of revisited. If you think there's anything that I've missed out, or if there's anything you're not too sure of or like me to explain again, leave it in the comments below, or if you head over to Discord, you can always ask me over there. I'm on there quite regularly, although I don't always write to people, always write back. I definitely read everything. It's because sometimes the people over there that are very skilled as well will reply, and the answer that I'll give will be very similar to what they've sort of give. So definitely head over there for help and advice. I'll leave all the links and stuff in the description below. And if you want to get involved in the label as well, you can go to retrothunderrecords.com and you can submit some of your stuff in there. And I'll get back to you. Everything's listened to, and all feedback's given on all tracks. But for that, guys, for this tutorial, guys, or this video, guys, that's about it really. Thanks for watching.